I lack any sort of hope at all because we have to remember the dynamics here. We've got two men who seem to be negotiating the future of a country without the leader of that country being present. That's absolutely incredulous. It's astonishing that that's the position that we're in. And one of those men is somebody who operates with the psychology only of a deal. So when you cut a deal, you're always looking to trade something. And what Donald Trump will trade in the name of peace is Ukrainian sovereign land. So this is a deeply worrying set of circumstances, whatever way you look at it.
First up, let's get into our chat. President Trump has said Ukraine needs to accept territories will be swapped with Russia, as Zelensky claims his intelligence services say Putin is definitely not preparing for a ceasefire. So is Friday's summit going to be a kind of victory for Vladimir Putin? Alex, what do you think? Do you think that Vladimir Putin has already won by just getting the meeting with Donald Trump?
Well, look, like many people, I listened to what President Trump was saying yesterday, and there was this kind of grotesque equivalence that he was drawing between the victim on the one hand, Volodymyr Zelensky, and then Vladimir Putin, the aggressor, on the other. And it was just appalling. So to that extent, it does feel like there's some kind of victory for Putin. But if, albeit by unorthodox means, this suddenly means that we can achieve a peace which is acceptable to Ukraine, underscored in triplicate, then all this will be forgotten, and he will be the great statesman. But I don't think that will happen. And I think ultimately it will mean humiliation for the United States. It will be effectively Putin being strengthened, and our fundamental sense of right and wrong, of what red lines should be, will have been diminished. So, look, I'm concerned. But look, let's hope he pulls it off. If he pulls it off, he'll be the great man and all will be forgiven. I'm a bit sceptical, though.
Kezia, are you sceptical, or do you think there is hope that it might be the beginning of a process to seeing a ceasefire in Ukraine?
I lack any sort of hope at all because we have to remember the dynamics here. We've got two men who seem to be negotiating the future of a country without the leader of that country being present. That's absolutely incredulous. It's astonishing that that's the position that we're in. And one of those men is somebody who operates with the psychology only of a deal. So when you cut a deal, you're always looking to trade something. And what Donald Trump will trade in the name of peace is Ukrainian sovereign land. So this is a deeply worrying set of circumstances, whatever way you look at it.
Is it going to be an even bigger day for Europe? And I ask this because this is what Europe was trying to avoid all along, a meeting where they're not in the room. Might have to come down to a decision where Europe decides whether they can support Ukraine without US assistance. We heard from JD Vance earlier this week in his interview on Fox News saying, look, Europe, this is happening in your neck of the woods and we're not prepared to keep paying for it. Alex, he kept saying that the American taxpayer doesn't want to see their cash be sent to Ukraine. And if you, Europe, want to buy weapons from us, that's fine. But we cannot indefinitely support Ukraine. So is this a moment where Europe's going to have to make that decision to perhaps turn down a deal that comes out of Friday's meeting and say, no, that deal is not good enough for Ukraine. We will continue to support President Zelensky in his fight to keep 100% of Ukrainian territory?
Yes, absolutely. So if it's the case that President Trump seeks to foist upon Ukraine a settlement which is unacceptable to the people of Ukraine because it involves a vast amount of concession of territory, then it is absolutely right that we in Europe should stand shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainians and send that clear signal. And by the way, look, of course it's the case that the might of the United States is incredibly important. But don't forget that war has changed fundamentally. And a lot of that heavy armor, which only the Americans can produce, is now not as important as things like new drone software, so software and hardware. We can bring a lot of material to bear in this fight, and we should continue to stand with Ukraine in the event that what is being proposed is unacceptable. It's about right and wrong, and we've got to know that we're on the appropriate side of that conundrum.
Kezia, what do you think the Europeans should be worried about after that meeting on Friday? Of course, many people are saying, look, nothing might come of it. It might be a damp squib. But what should Europe prepare for Friday?
Trump's boredom. So when a
Right.
deal doesn't happen, the idea that the president will essentially flounce out and once again say he's not interested and it's all on Europe to resolve. Now, I think there has been quite a significant shift in the past 6 to 9 months in Europe, recognising that we do need to carry more of the cost and the weight and the responsibility of funding this conflict. But that's not something you can just flick a switch on overnight. That needs and requires a degree of lead-in time, which is why we need to keep America interested and engaged in this for as long as possible, so that Europe can move towards spending more on defence in the way that it needs to support Ukraine. But the big danger is that Trump walks away and turns off the lights behind him.
Yeah, it's such a good point, and it is a distinct possibility, as Kezia points out there. It'll be really interesting to see. There is a meeting, an emergency meeting, a virtual one of European leaders, which we expect that Donald Trump will be dialing into on Wednesday, so tomorrow. We'll bring you the latest from that throughout the day here on Times Radio.
President, you mentioned your upcoming meeting with President Putin. Can you tell us what you hope to get out of that and whether you'll consider inviting President Zelensky to join?
So you have to understand, this is a war that should have never happened. This is a war that wouldn't have happened if I were president. It would have never happened. It was the apple of his eye. I got along very well with President Putin. So this is really a feel-out meeting a little bit. And President Putin invited me to get involved. He wants to get involved. I believe he wants to get it over with. Now, I've said that a few times, and I've been disappointed, because I'd have like a great call with him, and then missiles would be lobbed into Kiev or some other place, and you'd have 60 people laying on a road dying. The money that's been spent and the death is incredible. It's the worst thing that's happened, by far the worst that's happened since World War II. So I'm going in to speak to Vladimir Putin, and I'm going to be telling him, you got to end this war, you got to end it. And he wasn't going to mess with me. This war would have never happened. You know, we had a discussion about it one time, and we never had that discussion again. Would have never happened. So I'm going to go and see the parameters. Now, I may leave and say, good luck, and that'll be the end. I may say this is not going to be settled. I mean, there are those that believe that Putin wanted all of Ukraine. I happen to be one of them, by the way. I think if it weren't for me, he would not be even talking to anybody else right now. But I'm going to meet with him. We're going to see what the parameters are. And then I'm going to call up President Zelensky and the European leaders right after the meeting, yeah. And I'm going to tell them what kind of a deal. I'm not going to make a deal. It's not up to me to make a deal. I'm going to meet with President Putin, and we're going to see what he has in mind. And if it's a fair deal, I'll reveal it to the European Union leaders and to the NATO leaders, and also to President Zelensky. I think out of respect, I'll call him first, and then I'll call them after. And I may say, lots of luck, keep fighting, or I may say we can make a deal. Well, we're going to have a meeting with Vladimir Putin, and at the end of that meeting, probably in the first 2 minutes, I'll know exactly whether or not a deal can be made. How will you know that? Because that's what I do. I make deals. I expect to have a meeting with Putin that I think it'll be good, but it might be bad. And I'm here for one reason, to get rid of a war that somebody else started. Should have never happened. And if I could end it, great. Complex war, a lot of bad blood, But Zelensky's been there for 3.5 years, so if you put them in a room. Now, I will say this. Ultimately, I'm going to put the two of them in a room. I'll be there or I won't be there. And I think it'll get solved.